Welcome to the Investor Nation podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Elkins Hutton, the Director of Investor Education here at PassiveInvesting.com. And today I have with us Carlos Salguero. Carlos, welcome to the podcast. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Whitney. I appreciate the invite. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Carlos, before we dive into the details of the Gateway, 154 multifamily unit residential building with some commercial space in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, talk to me a little bit about yourself first. Like, how did you get into multifamily investing and where are you today?
Sure. I came to this country at 17 years old as a college student, first ever in my family from Quito, Ecuador. And I went to college, got a couple degrees, went to work for Hewlett Packard, and I enjoy the corporate life, but I saw that there was a glass ceiling there. So I quickly realized, I'm not going to be able to fulfill my dreams here. I started a business on the side, selling some stuff online, and that little e-commerce business grew and grew and grew. And eventually I needed a warehouse. So I bought my first commercial warehouse, a 50,000 square feet warehouse. I went from a small one to a 50,000. So I guess I was shooting for the stars even back then. And this warehouse allowed me to start 3 more businesses in there, right? So I started e-commerce, logistics, marketing, and of course I was sitting on all this real estate. And eventually I started a supplement brand, a nutritional supplement brand that I was able to sell for 8 figures. And when I had this exit, I looked back at my real estate and I said, you know what? Real estate has been that thing consistently making me money and passively creating cash flow for me. I had bought some single family homes, some duplexes, some fourplexes, some Airbnbs, and of course this commercial warehouse. And this commercial warehouse increased in value 9 times since I bought it 12 years ago. So that was a big clue. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna go 100% of my attention into real estate. And I started looking for what was the best asset class. And I found multifamily. I understood the math. I understood how you could appreciate the asset via the increase of the NOI, and the rest was history because now it's hooked. I had never seen a business that was as powerful as this in my 20 years of building businesses. So I started focusing on it, and in the last 12 months, I bought over 1,000 units of multifamily.
Well, that's awesome. Well, let's dive into the details here on the Gateway, that 154 multifamily unit building in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Murfreesboro.
A little bit of a tongue twister there. Yeah. So tell me, how did you find this property and when did you close on it?
Look, I found it of all places on Craigslist.com. I was searching for properties around Nashville, and this one popped up. And it was not classified properly. It was classified as a shopping center, not as a multifamily property. But I was looking also for retail. So my filter, I guess, included that. And then I see this beautiful apartment complex with a hospital behind it, right? There's a 15 million patient hospital right behind the property. Now I'm like, you know what? This might be sold by now because they had been in the market for like 90 days. I picked up the phone, called the broker, connected with the broker, and I said, hey, is this available? And he told me, yes, it's available. So I found it, and I had a friend, I live in Denver, so I had a friend go walk it the very next day and FaceTime me from the property. And he said, Carlos, you need to be here. This place is amazing. So sure enough, I was there 48 hours later, walking the property. I closed on it in March of this last year, Whitney.
Oh, fantastic. Now, you mentioned it had that hospital, behind it, but before the show, we were talking about how this actual multifamily unit complex has commercial attached to it.
Correct.
So what kind of commercial does it have attached to it?
Yeah, so the developer built this asset 10 years ago, and interestingly enough, he built it as his personal residence. He's still my tenant in the penthouse for another month, and he built it with commercial units in the first floor and apartments in the second, third, and fourth floor. And it's 3 buildings total. So, I guess the idea was he wanted to have businesses that are related to the hospital or restaurants and whatnot. So there's 37,000 square feet of commercial space on the first floor across the 3 buildings. And our tenants are OBGYN clinics, sports, ortho urgent care, optician. There's a juice bar, there's a coffee shop, there's an F45 fitness, and realtor. So there's a lot of good retail tenants and medical tenants as well in those commercial spaces.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, let's focus on the multifamily side because I'm really intrigued about that,
Yeah.
the business plan there. And so, okay, so you find the building, you call the realtor says it's still available. Your buddy goes and takes a look at it and says, Carlos, get here. So at what point in time did you put in an offer on the building, and how did you structure it?
Sure. So I went and walked it, right? I went and walked the property. I had the great fortune to meet the seller, and he personally toured me around the property, showed me the details. It's his pride and joy. So he showed me every single nook and cranny. I built a good relationship with him, and I was able to beat out another group that was $50 million liquid that wanted to buy the deal. And, basically what I did is I visited the property, took back the information, underwrote the deal, figured out what the deal was numbers wise, right? I built a pro forma. And Whitney, back in those days, I was still a little bit iffy about my underwriting skills. So what I did is I hired 4 different underwriters, send them the package, and I said, hey guys, underwrite this deal so that I could compare it to my notes. So I spent, quite a bit of money doing that, but that made me feel really confident that the deal that we had was a good deal. It was being traded on actual performance of the asset and not pro forma, because, a lot of people want to sell their asset on pro forma. So at that point, I said, you know what, this is what I'm comfortable in paying for the property. And I sent an LOI. So between me visiting the property and sending an LOI, maybe 2-3 days.
Okay. And what did you offer? And then what did you guys end up closing at?
Yeah, so he wanted $19.5 million for the property. I offered 17.5. So there was a little bit of a gap there. And, the good thing is that I didn't get out of here. I didn't get you're crazy. What are you doing? What I got is feedback from the broker about what was kind of the guidance price and why. So I really went into my logic of, look, this is why I'm offering this. This is what my numbers support. This is what my business plan support. So I really took the time in explaining my numbers. And I think that helped me because the broker was able to communicate that back. And then we kind of met in the middle. At some point, we met at $18.6 million, which was the price that I feel was, fair enough to the seller. And I was able to do that as well with the loan that I was planning to get for the property. And that's what the offer was, accepted at 18.6.
Okay. All right. So what is you're sitting here looking at the data. You guys are kind of going back and forth on pricing in order to get it under contract. What was your thinking in the overall business plan moving forward with that? And then what did you put in the offer, right? You mentioned that you beat out another company that had $50 million liquid cash. You're like, what did you put in your offer that allowed you to button that up?
Yeah. So look, I think the offer was part of it, Whitney, but I think the relationship was the strongest part of my offer. I had the chance to meet the seller, and I started building the relationship with him right away. I delivered cookies to his doorstep the day right after, and I found out that he liked sweets. So that was my strategy. I had brought a bottle of wine with me, and I asked his staff, hey, does he like wine? And they said, no, he doesn't drink. So I gave the wine to my friend instead. And I told him, hey, can you bring cookies tomorrow and deliver them in person? So when we had the buyer interview, because there was a buyer interview with myself and 2 other groups, those buyer interviews are like super serious and stern. And I was like, hey, mister, did you like the cookies? And that broke the ice right away. He smiled. He said, man, those were great. Thank you so much. So look, I don't know if my offer was really numbers wise better than the other group, but I knew that because he was the developer builder and this was his pride and joy asset, he wanted to pass it on to somebody that will take care of it and that will also be proud of it. So I think maybe the institution that had the $50 million was not the buyer that he had in mind to pass on this beautiful property to.
I love that relationship building. One could call it a strategy, but really you mentioned, before our show that, real estate is relationships. So that's awesome. So let's talk about the actual offer. Like, when was the LOI accepted, the purchase sale agreement accepted? And then what was your timeline for due diligence? Was there any earnest money put down? Did anything go hard at any point in time? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no. So we always think that things are going to happen specifically at a certain time. So, I offered with 45 days of due diligence and then another 45 days to close. Now, those terms were accepted. So by the time that we signed the LOI, I'm like, okay, maybe we'll be under contract in like 2 weeks, right? And then the lawyers start getting involved. We start working on the PSA. And it wasn't like a month and a half until we had the final draft of the PSA. And this is working like almost every day, right? Because it's a pretty involved process. That's why when people sometimes tell me, oh, we'll be under contract in 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, I haven't had one yet go in contract in 2 weeks. So anyways, took a month and a half to go under contract. I put $300,000 down. It was refundable still at that point. And then at the money going hard after the inspection period, we were going to go another 300,000 non-refundable. So, pretty sizable earnest money for this property, but I was very confident about it, right? So went through the 45-day due diligence, getting all the stuff that we needed, finding at those times a good lender that could give us a deal, because as you know, Whitney, mixed use doesn't have the same lending as multifamily. This is now multifamily with commercial. So not every lender does that. So we had to go through iterations of finding the right lender at the same time as we were doing the due diligence, going through the leases, going through the financials, doing the inspections. One thing that happened that was really good is my attorney said, Carlos, get those third-party reports ordered right away. Don't wait until the lender orders them. And, that was a great call, because back in those days, the market was still so hot that every third-party report company, the survey, the phase one, the environmental, the zoning, everything was still like weeks and weeks out, some of them 6 weeks out. So that gave us enough time to get those reports in before due diligence ended, and we were ready to go into closing after that. So that's about what it took as far as due diligence. Now, it never goes to plan. So, and you should plan for things extending a little bit. So at some point, we found some discrepancies on the financials. So we requested an extra 15-day extension for our due diligence, which was granted. The seller was kind enough to grant us that. We extended the due diligence. We went through that. And at that point, we already engaged the lender. And at that point, when you engage the lender, as you know, you have to put a deposit for the lender to start doing their work. You're paying for their underwriting, you're paying for their legal, you're paying for everything. And then they start their process. And it did not go as fast as we thought. We thought we were going to be closed by December. Now, bear in mind, we put the deal under contract in October of 2021. We thought we were going to be done sometime in December, but throughout the process, it just kept taking a little bit longer. The lender wanted a property management company that was national, not regional, that had boots in the ground. So we had to go interview a lot of people. And now we find out that the national property management companies don't do this size of assets, right? They do only the massive 300 unit deals. So it was a negotiation with the lender saying, hey, we can't find a national company that will take on this size of a deal. Can we scale this back to a regional player, or maybe somebody local? So that negotiation took like 3 to 4 weeks. So that was one of the things that delayed things. Then the next thing, as the year closes, we didn't close in December. I was ready to get started, Winnie. I was so ready to get started. I already had raised the money. I already had everything to go. I already had hired an asset manager exclusive for this deal. And actually, I asked the permission of the seller, hey, can my asset manager show up and be there shadowing you guys, because it was a self-managed deal by the seller. shadowing you guys, learning the asset, learning the processes, learning the tenants, so that we can hit the ground running when we close. And he's like, yeah, Carlos, no problem. So my guy shows up in January, and we were supposed to close by the 15th of January now. And again, the lender says, no, we need more time. And that's right when the interest rates started kind of shaking up a little bit. Lender starts getting a little nervous. We're like, oh, well, what's happening? They kept kind of kicking the can forward. And long story short, Whitney, so finally we got our property management company approved. And then secondly, I get a call from the lender not even 2 weeks before close. And they say, Carlos, we have some bad news and some good news. I'm like, give me the good news. Well, we are increasing your interest rate. I'm like, good news? Was that the good news? I'm like, well, we are actually fixing your rate at 5.25, because I was getting a bridge with floating rate. Now, at the time, that didn't feel like it was good news, but now it feels amazing news, right? So they fixed my rate at 5.25. It went up 50 basis points. And the bad news was we're taking $1 million away from your proceeds because we're nervous about the interest rate market. And I'm like, oh man, are you serious? 2 weeks before close. Anyways, I scrambled and I went and sat down with the seller. And I said, hey, Mr. Seller, would you loan me the $1 million that I need to close this deal? And I thought he was going to say yes, but he said no. After this whole ordeal, and we're already in February, Whitney, right? We blew through that January thing. We're already in February. And he says no. So I'm like, okay, but you know what? I'm just going to call my investors. So all in all, we raised an extra $1 million to get that closed. And sure enough, we closed it March 1st of 2022. That's when the closing date was.
Well, congratulations. And let's talk about like the loan, since we're kind of on this piece. So
Sure.
You ended up with 5.5% capped rate. What's the amortization period? Are there any lockouts, prepayment penalties, anything like that?
Yeah. So it's a 3-year bridge with 2 6-month extensions, which is in line with our business plan. That's what we wanted. And we cannot refinance until month 18, right? So after month 18, there's a lockout period. We can refinance after month 18.
Okay. And then you mentioned that you raised capital. So you're in at 18.6, right? For 154 units and plus the commercial space. Now, what did the bank end up bringing, after reducing your proceeds by $1 million? And then what did the investors end up bringing? And how did you structure that?
Yeah, so originally the bank was going to give us 17 and change, right? And then they scaled back to like $16.4 million. And in that too, there was another component, is we wanted extra money for leasing commissions and tenant improvement allowance for the commercial, because there was some commercial vacancy that we needed to market. So, it didn't really affect returns too much. It probably reduced our returns had they leveraged higher by 0.5 point, right? So it wasn't a big hit to our investors. And it was just a matter of us communicating to investors, hey guys, the deal's still great, but we just have to bring more cash to the table. And a lot of that cash came from me because, I really wanted to make sure that this deal got closed, and I'm the majority investor in the deal anyways.
Okay. So, so how much, so there's like a couple $1 million here that your investor base had to bring. How did you structure that deal with them? Is there a preferred return? What did returns look like for them?
Yeah, sure.
What were the fees?
Yeah, so straight 80-20 split, right? GP's on 20%, the LP's on 80%, straight cash flow. We didn't do any pref. We didn't do any multiple investor classes. That's typical of my deals, by the way. I usually find deals where we can cash flow right away after we close. And the offer to investors was we're going to pay about 6% cash on cash year one, which was in line with the business plan. And that just took in the business plan is we were underwriting $200 rent bumps on the residential, and we were underwriting signing at least 3 commercial leases. So, in the first year of operation, which is coming up here in a couple months, we've increased rents by $450 on the residentials, and we've signed 3 commercial leases at about $3 more a square foot that we had planned. So, went really, really well. I paid right around 10% cash on cash to investors for the last year on this deal.
Oh, amazing. All right. So what's your hold period? What's the business plan length here? Like, what are you looking to do?
Yeah. So the goal is to refinance the property within the first 3 years that our bridge is there. I have another $9 to $10 million of upside this year that I can realize by finishing renting the vacant commercial spaces that are in the property. And we'll probably see another bump of about 5%, 6% on the residential, just because we have that anchor hospital right behind us. So, this deal was never really marketed to doctors and nurses and traveling nurses and all that stuff. Now we're doing that full on. So, we're starting to see our tenant population really explode in terms of medical professionals. And as you know, that's very good. So, we're moving towards that, and then we'll refinance around year 3. We're planning to return about 80% plus of the capital to investors at that point, if not 100%. I might do 100% if we get to the point where we need to be. But the promise was at least 80%. And then we're going to put a permanent loan on it. We're probably going to hold on to this asset for 2, 3, 4 decades and continue to cash flow on the property, refinance it again 10 years out and whatnot. This is a trophy property, right? A lot of people ask me, how in the world did you score this? If you guys search the Gateway Village Murfreesboro, you'll know what I'm talking about when you see the video of the property.
Awesome. So what kind of fees did you charge in this particular deal?
Yeah, so we charge a 2% acquisition fee, and we charge a 2% asset management fee. So, the fee that covers our expenses for managing the manager. And remember, I also planted on-site asset manager in the deal that lives at the property, which Whitney has been a game changer. It has helped us completely turn around the property. Not that it needed turning around, but in the sense of my asset manager is there to, really manage the manager on a daily basis, keep track of KPIs, make sure that prospective tenants are taken care of immediately, that prospective commercial tenants are shown units immediately, that we fixed any maintenance issues immediately. I'll give you an example. We had Christmas Eve, there was a freeze in Tennessee, and one of our sprinkler systems froze and flooded part of the second floor, right? The fact that my asset manager was there, the property manager were off for the holidays, my asset manager was there. He took care of things instantly, made sure the water was off, make sure the remediation company showed up, took care of it with the insurance company. So it has been a game changer for the property. And that's why we've pushed value so much, so quick.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap up a little bit, because you had an amazing journey with this property, some ups and downs, but you got it across the finish line. But let's talk about, what is one thing that you thought was going to go easier that ended up being harder, and what was one thing that was harder that ended up being easier?
Yeah. So look, I thought that building out commercial units was going to be easier, right? I thought it was going to be, it's going to take 60, 90 days. Get the tenant in, get them excited, sign a lease, let's go. So anything construction, guys, is going to take longer than you plan, because it's going to go over budget typically, and it's going to go over the timeline. And that has been the case. So I thought that was going to be easier. It's been harder. That doesn't mean I'm not going to do it, but I know now that I should plan for more time and more money. And then the other thing that I thought it was going to be a little bit harder is the residential leases, like bumping the rents. I thought that us pushing the rents that much, like 200, feel pretty good because we saw the market around it. But when we started pushing past 300 and adding some fees, I truly thought we were going to get a lot of pushback by tenants. I truly thought that they were going to be up in arms, right? I'll give you an example, Whitney. We raised our pet fees from $20 per pet to $75 per pet. And I thought, oh man, these pet owners are gonna have, you know, crazy feelings about this. We didn't have one complaint. So that part, us pushing rents in this class AAA property and us pushing some fees up, surprisingly, we didn't have any pushback. They were willing to pay it, and some tenants have renewed at the bumps. People that have been there for like 5 years, 7 years.
All right. And were the fees just a one-time fee?
Well, no, we charged a pet fee of $500 per pet, and then a recurring $75 rent per
pet rent.
pet,
Okay,
pet
got
rent. Yeah, so I have a lady that has 3 dogs, so she's paying $75 times 3 for her dogs.
Oh wow. Okay. I was gonna say a one-time bump from 25 to 75. I don't know, like $50. I don't think I would go get the moving van, but $300 a month. Oh, it must be a very amazing property to be at.
It is.
Well, Carlos, thank you so much for spending your time with us here today and sharing your insights. If listeners want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on my website. It's very easy to find by my name, or iamcarlos10x.com. And then you can find me with that handle, iamcarlos10x.com, on every social media platform, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, anywhere you look. Just find Carlos Multifamily, you'll probably find me.
Awesome. Well, Carlos, thank you again for spending your time with us here today. We look forward to following you on your future deals.
Thanks so much, Whitney. Thanks for having me.